Hello everyone, welcome to the second episode of the FGLI podcast. In this episode, Khaliun Dorjmenchim, class of 25, and Guadalupe Espinoza, class of 26, talk about Guadalupe's journey to Penn and her position as a student leader in the FGLI community. From being told she's not going to get anywhere to being the first in her family to graduate high school, Guadalupe speaks on the turning point of her education and how it stemmed from her caring teachers and her mother's belief in her. At Penn, Guadalupe has become a student leader through the Penn First Board and planned the first ever professional development trip to New York City, run by the board since prior to the pandemic. Keep on listening to learn about Guadalupe's journey and learn some of her helpful advice.
Welcome back to the FGLI podcast. This is college junior Khaliun Dorjmenchim, and today with me I have a very good friend of mine, Guadalupe. Please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you for having me here today on the FGLI podcast. I'm very excited to be here. My name is Guadalupe. I'm a current sophomore in the college. My major is currently undecided, but I will be declaring by the end of sophomore year, so that should be exciting.
Awesome. So the whole kind of twist of this episode, you can say, is Guadalupe, during her freshman year alongside Heavenly Davis, planned a professional development trip to New York City. This trip took, I believe, 24 students to New York City, completely free of charge to the students, to visit 4 alumni offices, as well as a cultural excursion. And it was the first professional development trip that Penn First, which is a fully student-run board, planned to New York City since before the pandemic. It was an absolute success. But before we get into that, Guadalupe, I wanted to kind of touch into your journey before Penn and kind of your process of getting in, if you're comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so before Penn, so I grew up in Boyle Heights, East Los Angeles, also known as Los Angeles, or like a couple minutes away from downtown LA. And elementary school, I was not always the best child. I was not very academically wise. I was not the best child, and also behavior wise. I spent my time in the vice principal's office, elementary school, many times, and one of the times that I will never forget is when the vice principal, Miss Cortez, I will call out her name in this podcast, she told my mom in Spanish, Lupita no va a llegar a nada con este comportamiento, which translates to Lupita's not going to get anywhere with this behavior. And so my mom, as a mother, she was very disappointed, someone with a higher position would tell her this, and especially to a child too. I was very young, and she was already saying this about me. And so my mom decided to transfer me to another school in the area as well, which was KPLA Prep. And that school changed my life for the best. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for that school. And so I ended up starting my 5th grade year there. And although my 5th and 6th grade years were a bit rough, I didn't have the best reading level, wasn't very still academically achieving yet. And 7th grade, I think it's when everything started to come to me. I started to actually put effort into my academics. I started to enjoy school. And 7th grade year was also the year that I passed my ESL test, which is the English learning test, which is a test that's given to non-native English speakers. And since Spanish was my first language, that's the language I grew up speaking. And so middle school was just a great year where I started to gain those academic habits. And I also had teachers who deeply influenced me. Miss Loera, Miss Norsha, Miss Monroy. I will never forget all those teachers that influenced my life in middle school, and then that ultimately led to me being successful in high school and keeping that up. And although I was the first person also in my immediate family to graduate from high school, none of my parents graduated. My mom only went up to 3rd grade and my dad only went up to 6th grade. I had that immense, ever since I stepped into 9th grade, I always said to myself, I'm going to graduate high school. I'm going to be the first in my family. And that's what kept me pushing through all throughout my 4 years of high school, and also getting accepted into college and attending higher education. So I did the Questbridge College of Scholars, and I also did the Questbridge National College match. And I ended up matching with Penn, and I also did Penn's flying program, and it was also my first flying program acceptance. So I think it was all just meant to be. Like, Penn was the place for me.
Aw.
And so I ended up, I knew already by like end of this, like beginning of December that I was gonna go to Penn, and it was just a very exciting moment for me.
That's so
And
amazing. Yeah, and I think that's really inspiring to kind of come from that position, to acknowledge it, to acknowledge the teachers that helped you get to this point, but also to acknowledge your personal accomplishments to get into Penn. So, kind of transitioning to this point, you're a freshman at Penn, a fresh and low limited income freshman. How was it like actually being here? You get to the point where you're accepted. You're like, okay, this like I've done it. I've accomplished my goals. The next one is finishing this 4-year degree. All of a sudden, you're at this very prestigious university with. Would you say the community at Penn, let's say the demographics was different from what you grew up with, and kind of how did that impact your first exposure?
Yeah, I would say it was completely different. Like, and I kind of like had mentioned time like, oh, like there's gonna be a huge culture shock. Like, there's gonna be things that you're not used to seeing, and that's definitely something that I experienced. But like, I don't think I like recognize the idea that, oh, like these are things that like people just do on a daily basis. And it took me a while to like understand that.
Yeah.
Because it was like, whoa, like I think like I was just so excited to come to Penn that I didn't really consider like many other things going on around me. Like, I was just like, oh my God, I'm in college. I'm like by myself. I'm away from my family. And it was just a very exciting moment. But then again, like, I think things really started to take a turn when like the academic fall semester really started, and like I started to like have a lack of sense of belonging. I didn't want to be here. I was like, I'm gonna take a gap semester. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't deserve to be here. However, like I had lots of people here that were I had a really good support system. So like my academic advisor, Dr. Enmore, I think he's helped me a lot since the first day I stepped on Penn, and just many other influential adults at Penn that have ultimately like told me that, you know, I do deserve to be here. Penn is the place for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was just a lot of lack of sense of belonging, a lot of imposter syndrome. But I know that now I do know that, you know, I do deserve to be in this space, and this for Penn accepted me for a reason, and that's why I'm here.
That's a great mindset. And I feel like it's a really common experience that no one really talks about, is like this intense feeling of imposter syndrome. I had it too as well. Like when I came in my freshman year, my family had to leave. Like we came into Philadelphia, they had to leave the next day at like 2 p.m. I just remember feeling so like lonely. I was like crying. I was like, I can't be here. And especially when classes started, there was just like, it was even more intense. Everyone was already talking about research. Everyone was already talking about internships as freshmen. And especially coming from like that first generation standpoint, like I'm just trying to like keep afloat right now. But I love that you kind of had this moment and you had the support community where you kind of switched that mindset to like, I am supposed to be here for a reason. And I think that's something important for any listeners or like incoming freshmen to think about. There's going to be a moment where it kind of clicks. And I think like a lot of people complain on like the group meets and the Reddit, but everyone I've talked to, it kind of had a moment where they were straight up like, this is the place for me. And I'm not going to let myself like kind of be held back. I'm not going to let myself be told I don't belong here. So kind of keep me kind of moving with this chronological time scheme. I can't think. Timeline. Let's talk about Penn student organizations. What was fall semester like in regards to student orgs?
Yeah, so when it came to student orgs, like, one, I didn't even know all these clubs existed. Like, so many pre-professional clubs, people dressing up in suits and, like, going to interviews, all these coffee chats, which I didn't even know existed. Like, there was just this strong sense of, like, professionalism, which, honestly, no hate to those people that did it. Like, good for you. Like, you know, if that's what you care and that's what you're passionate about, go ahead and do it. But it was kind of overwhelming because I feel like freshman year, it was all about me just filling up a whole bunch of essays, putting my heart and soul into them just to get into a club. And I was also very intentional with the clubs that I was applying to. So, for example, I make sure that the clubs that I applied to, they had some sort of personal interest or also just something that I was passionate about or something that aligned with me personally. Like when it comes to clubs, some clubs can be very performative in things that they do and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't want to put myself in that place. So my involvement is mainly in clubs that I actually deeply, intentionally care about, and it's something that's going to make an impact. And that's just something that I always like have in my mindset. So like if it's not causing an impact in the day, then I don't want to do it because ultimately I'm not going to be happy at the end of the day. And yeah, with student orgs, I always made that a thing. Like,
yeah, no, that's awesome. So kind of shifting gears into leading up to the professional development trip, what was it like first joining the Penn First Board during a time where it was really transitioning? All the FGLI groups were trying to recover from the pandemic as a background and rebuild their membership and get back into doing what they love doing. What was that perspective like as someone joining in the middle of that process?
Yeah, that perspective, honestly, it was, well, I got accepted into the Penn First Board. I applied my freshman fall and I got accepted. And when I first went to I don't know, the professional development, like the description, it just like appealed to me. I was like, yeah, I'm applied to it. And that's the role that I ended up going with. And I'm still sticking with it now. And as a freshman, I was like, well, like I have to plan this professional development trip to New York. Like it was going to be in New York City. So like in New York City. And I was like, whoa. And I had never been to New York City prior to that either. And so I felt like this immense pressure on me. And I was like, well, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, how is this going to work out? Like, there was just so many thoughts. But then again, I told myself, this is something I deeply care about. It'll have a positive impact on the family community. And everything always ends up working out. That's the thing that I always tell myself too. I feel like everything does end up working out. And so, yeah, it did end up working out. And it was a very successful trip.
So kind of coming in, I was the finance and operations chair then, and I remember when I gave you that role, I was really scared that you were going to drop out of the club. I was like, I feel like I'm overwhelming this person, because normally that would be given to an upperclassman or someone who's kind of been a part of Penn First for so long. But again, all these FGLI orgs are trying to rebuild, and you and Henley did a phenomenal job, who was another freshman at the time. And let's talk about the planning process the first time you're doing it. This trip hasn't happened in years, but it's something that everyone kind of knows has happened. Everyone knows there's some kind of precedent. We were working very closely with the Greenfield Intercultural Center at the time, the GIC. Can you please provide some?
Yeah, so I believe you gave me the point of contact to reach out to Toys. And Toys, she was one of the first few people that helped us get the brainstorming started, which ended up connecting us with Lizette Garza, who was also at Alumni Relations at the time. And without her, this trip couldn't have happened. Without Toys, Lizette, and Heavenly, this trip could not have happened at all. And we ultimately, I think we started planning towards the end of freshman fall. So closer to November, December. We were just brainstorming what offices we want to visit, what was the goal of this. And we ended up finalizing our office visits and also including in cultural excursion and also just having the offices, the alumni, the student interest as well. Also what we were going to eat too. That was also something that, was up to the discretion of us. What do you guys want to eat? I remember Liza asking us that. So it's just all this behind the scenes planning that had to happen. And it was ultimately me and Heavenly were the ones making these decisions for everyone who was going to participate. And it all ended up working out. We went to Tribeca, the film company. We went to city headquarters. We saw the trade floor, and we went to Asana, the tech company, which is at the World Trade Center. We were I was also so amazed because we were on the 47th floor. It was just so cool. You can get a little glimpse of the Statue of Liberty from the office, which is so cool. And then we also had a cultural excursion. We went to 9/11 Memorial Museum, and it was given by a former Penn alumni who survived the 9/11 attack. So that was a very sentimental moment and very personal moment to have with the Penn alumni. And yeah, it was a great trip. It was a great trip overall.
Yeah, and that's just talking about like the bare bones basics of the trips. I think another really important aspect of it was that, like you said, this was a lot of time these students got the chance to go to New York despite living in Philadelphia, which is very close because they just didn't have the opportunity to. And even for some students, it was like their first time riding the Amtrak. And I think it's just all these little things that add up when it comes to trips like this, where it's not just at the end of the day the connections you got, the experiences you learned. It's what you went through. It's like what you experienced. And I think that's what makes the trip really important. Because there are, especially now, a lot of trips that take students to New York City or other places. But oftentimes they're like kind of included with an application, some essay, something like that. Or they're just open to the general public, which should be the case. Like, everyone should have the opportunity to go to New York. But I think having this specific Penn First trip where, you know, you don't have to do an application. You just come in, you sign up, you tell us you want to go, and we do everything we can to take as many people as we can. So that was spring semester of last year. Now, knowing and like having this experience coming back in, what was it like replanning this trip with a different funding source, with like different advisors speaking to?
Yeah, so different funding sources. So we did have to do a SAC appeal a couple weeks ago, and it was very it was concerning how some people were asking, well, first of all, like FGLI students to pay out of pocket, and it was only a couple $100s that we were asking more, like it wasn't that much. And it was just like beyond me how like people are asking, oh, like, why can't you guys like pay out of pocket of this? And it honestly, for me, it's a huge financial barrier to be paying out of pocket for this. Like, we often have to work like, you know, many jobs on campus. Like one of my roommates, she works like 2 jobs, to like, you know, make our ends meet. And I think like just asking students to like pay out of pocket, and many of the questions that were asked was like pretty crazy, that people have this like, you know, mindset that we can just like, you know, just pay out of pocket. And also like the Amtrak experience too. It was also my first time taking the Amtrak last March, which just, I believe it's just an experience of itself, you know, and everyone should get to have that experience. And the fact that Penn offers it, you know, you're an undergrad here, you deserve to be here. You have the opportunity to access that experience. Nobody else can tell you otherwise. So yeah, we did do that, and we're currently in the we ended up winning our SAC appeal, so yes. Woohoo. And we're currently in the planning process of planning another professional development trip. And the process also is going to be very competitive. It's going to be very similar to last year. You just sign up, show interest, and then you have a waiting list. It's also first come, first serve. So yeah, I look forward to planning the next professional development trip, and I'm very excited to be working with Dr. Enmore and Mark Lowe, which are people at the P1P office, and very thankful for their support as well, since they have been very influential in both helping Penn First Board, and also just helping the student body at Penn.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing your experiences and what it was like kind of behind the scenes of planning this New York professional development trip. If it's okay with you, let's talk a little bit more about being a FGLI organization, because this is something Peter and I have talked about before. FGLI isn't something necessarily that you're proud of, and I think it's fair. It's very different of being proud of, for example, your Hispanic heritage or your Asian American heritage versus I'm poor, and I think that's a really tough thing with student groups of kind of garnering the participation of being a board member, but also kind of coming to these events. What do you think Penn has done right about making FGLI a proud identity, and maybe things that not so much, things that we still need to work on?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that Penn has done that personally I have loved about like, you know, the FGLI community presence on campus and everything. Well, one, I think having that, you know, space in College Hall that is specifically dedicated for FGLI students. For example, in that space, I usually go to city rooms, for example, if I have a meeting, because other GSRs, especially when it comes when like midterm times, other things get packed, and I often don't see the P1P rooms booked, so I will make sure to book those rooms. And so I love how we have those like, you know, spaces there, and also just like the common area space. There's always snacks you can always get there. There's always some sort of activity. Actually, last week, Penn First Board, we had a paint and sip.
Yes.
And right after class, I ended class at 3. I was there until like 5 p.m. painting. And it was just like a nice, fun social. We had such great turnout. We also had apple cider. Mm-hmm. It was such an amazing event. So like events like this, like, you know, really just demonstrate and highlight like the beautiful presence of the FGLI community at Penn. And how like, you know, when we all come together, we can like truly make this like, you know, a better experience for all of us. And also just like, you know, for us, like gain more exposure, and also let many other students, you know, may be too afraid to step into this space, because, you know, some people may not know about P1P. They might not know about many of the resources that are accessible. So, you know, just making sure that, you know, this is a space for everyone. Everyone is welcomed. So I believe that's one thing that Penn does really well. P1P does really well. And also like first gen week, I like loved it.
Yeah, they've done like a really amazing job. Do you think like there's anything institutionally we need to work on regarding being FGLI and being proud of the identity and supporting this community?
Institutionally, I do believe like specifically regarding the latest decision on like the textbooks access codes, I believe that for example, I had to pay out of pocket for one of my classes this year, and although it may not seem that much to many people, like that money had to come out of my refund. Ever since I started college, I haven't financially asked my parents for money. One, because of guilt, and two, because I just want to be more financially responsible. So like I guess there's also that guilt that comes to like, you know, and my parents also don't earn that much money. So yeah, so I believe like textbook access codes really think something that we can establish institutionally, like within all classes, and potentially having a specific part in the syllabus where, you know, we can clarify where students can reach out to, what alternatives there are to this, and potentially also releasing it in advance, so that when school starts, you know, you don't have to waste like, you don't have, like, for example, a student may not have the means to like, you know, right away find the means to like, you know, afford this textbook, because textbooks can, especially if you have to get from multiple classes, it can definitely add up. And another thing I would say as well is during the breaks too is allocating more funding. For example, for like Thanksgiving, I remember last year I got like $25. I think it was 25. I don't really remember the amount, but really prices can be pretty expensive, and a meal may not be that much for like, you know, if you're doing like a full day course meal where like, you know, you have to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Those $25 will probably last you for like maybe like a small breakfast and like some, like a little snack or something. But it will not last you the full day. And so I believe that also like being open about like allocating more expenses, and also when it comes to winter break as well, since I know many students do stay here on campus for winter break.
Yeah, and I think to kind of just like put it into perspective, because a lot of people may look at that and be like, you should pay for your own food or something like that. But with Penn, the way like as an underclassman, you have to get a dining plan. So that's already money like kind of coming out of your refund. And then you have this refund that's for living expensive, for emergencies. So you already have this dining plan that you were kind of forced to opt into, and to have to stay out for these breaks and like have these dining halls closed. I think meal funding, kind of echoing what you said, is really important. And that's kind of like the background why. All right, awesome. So as we're kind of wrapping up, are there any parting words, now that you've kind of been part of the Penn First Board for 2 years, kind of had the experience of working behind the scenes, any advice you'd have?
Yeah, I would just say to like any student, if you ever feel some like lack of sense of belonging, you feel like you don't belong here, just know that you have you have worked just as hard as many of the other people on this campus, and you deserve to be here. You deserve to step into that classroom. You deserve to ask your professor questions. You deserve to be part of those club spaces. Like, you deserve to put yourself out there. You got into the school just like everyone else. So I would say, don't ever self-doubt yourself. And, times may get tough, but you always have a great support system. And you can always reach out to, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to anyone at P1P. Many of the staff there are very welcoming. They're openly always willing to hear where you're coming from. And also make sure to access the resources. Don't be ashamed, because I know there's many, some people will look down on you for asking for help. Don't be ashamed to request a Wangorian tutor. Don't be afraid to stop by the writing center. I did that all my freshman year. Stop by the writing center to get someone to look at your paper. Take advantage of the resources at Penn. Make sure you get even the career services. Get your resume reviewed. That's something that I take huge advantage of, especially when I'm applying for internships and stuff. And I would also say, potentially also make sure that you also not only engage within the Penn community, but also outside the Penn community. So becoming actively involved outside the Penn community, because I feel like sometimes we can get trapped inside this Penn bubble.
Yeah.
We often forget what's going on around us.
Yeah.
So I would recommend potentially checking out the Netter Center. That's something I am involved with, and getting involved within the West Philadelphia community. That is something that I love doing, and it brings me a strong sense of community. I forget about everything going on at Penn.
Oh.
So yeah, I would say go ahead and do that as well. Check out the Clark Park Farmers Market. Go out into Center City. Take yourself out, and you deserve to get treated as well. And you got this for everyone hearing this, and I'm wishing you guys all the best.
So that wraps up this episode of the FGLI Podcast. Please make sure to check out our social medias at the FGLI Podcast, and stay tuned for more episodes on Spotify, Apple Music, and Google Podcasts. Guadalupe, where can people find you?
You guys can find me on Instagram. I have a very long username, but it's Guadalupe Espinoza 287, or you can also follow my TikTok, which is I love tapioca and a 0.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.